Hello and welcome to our session with Daniella, a wonderful genetic counselor who we do these Ask a Genetic Counselor segments with to really shed light on different questions that we all have about topics related to genetics and genetic counseling. So, hey, Daniella.
Hi.
Thanks for being here. And today's question is, does genetic testing apply to the Sephardi and Mizrahi community? Because I think a lot of people think this is just an Ashkenazi Jewish test, or that, only Ashkenazi Eastern European Jews are at risk. So I'd love for you to give a little bit more insight into the non-Ashkenazi community.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it's one that I get often. People are always asking, like, what is it about the Ashkenazi Jewish community that there's this kind of association with being a carrier for things, and there's kind of this group of diseases that are more common in that community. So I think it's really important to understand that there are diseases, genetic conditions, genetic traits that are more common in every ethnic group. That spans beyond the Jewish community, African Americans, Hispanics, East Asian individuals. And it really, and of course, Mizrahi Jews, Sephardic Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, it really reflects any sort of genetic isolation over time. And what that means is any community, whether it be a kind of a cultural group, an ethnic group, a geographic isolation, let's say a tribe that lived on an isolated island for hundreds of years, let's say, any group that was isolated genetically over time for one reason or another is going to have a gene pool where certain traits become more common over time. So like Ashkenazi Jews were isolated, not necessarily geographically, but they were really insular in Eastern Europe. So they remained a tight, cohesive group. And we know that, Jewish individuals tend to marry Jewish individuals, not necessarily those that are related to them, but just within their community. And so what ends up happening is the diversity in the gene pool kind of dampens a little bit. And so certain traits happen to occur at higher frequency than in other groups. And those traits could be things like blue eyes. They could be things like blonde hair or dark hair, light skin, dark skin. They can also be things like genetic conditions. So I think a lot of why the Ashkenazi Jewish community has become kind of like the poster child for genetic screening is because a lot of this genetic screening and this whole concept started with Tay-Sachs, right? And carrier screening for Tay-Sachs. And people, not so much of our generation, but of, let's say, our parents' generation will say to me, oh yeah, before I got married, they took my blood and tested me and my partner for Tay-Sachs. Everyone remembers.
It was so commonplace, right?
Yes, and it was the first, really historically, the first mass carrier screening thing that happened was for Tay-Sachs. And it made headlines, and it was this big, amazing thing that was done. And really Tay-Sachs, the frequency of Tay-Sachs and the tragedy of Tay-Sachs was really brought down with this carrier screening. So it was quite an accomplishment in the Jewish community. And I think that those headlines have stuck over time. But on the flip side, I think it's also given people of other ancestries a little bit of, oh, I don't need to do that because I'm not Ashkenazi, which is not true. So there are certain conditions that are more common in Persian Jewish individuals and Arab ancestry, so Mizrahi Jewish individuals, Sephardic Jewish individuals. They're different diseases than the Ashkenazi Jewish genetic diseases that we see more commonly in that community, but they absolutely occur at a higher frequency in those communities than in others. So I certainly think that carrier screening is appropriate for anybody. And I mean, outside of the Jewish community and inside of the Jewish community. And to be honest, these days, we don't see as much of that sort of insular communities that we used to. I think you see a lot more mixed individuals, half Ashkenazi, half Mizrahi, half Sephardic, half this. Sephardic individuals marrying Ashkenazi individuals. And it's just a result of where the world is today. And just because you're not Ashkenazi doesn't mean you can't be a carrier for Tay-Sachs. There's always that chance. And, even in actually French Canadians, there's a very high carrier frequency for Tay-Sachs. So I really think that just the genetic diversity that we have today and the mixes that we're seeing, it's really important for anybody that's planning on having children to have kids.
Regardless of background to get.
And the other thing that I think has changed is we used to have panels that were like, this is the Ashkenazi Jewish panel, this is the Sephardic Jewish panel. These days, it's really kind of like a comprehensive, they call it a pan-ethnic panel for everyone,
Makes
whether
sense.
you're Jewish, whether you're not. Yeah, so like J-screen, I mean, I think it's over 200 diseases that you guys screen for. And I think that that's kind of the baseline that's done for most people across the board.
Yeah, and as time goes on, you know, more and more diseases are going to be added. So it's just so important for everyone to be getting tested for so many diseases, regardless of background. And also, who knows kind of sometimes what's in the wood pile, right? Like maybe you're adopted, or maybe you don't have a full family history, right? Mm-hmm. In the Holocaust or sometime in your family history. So I think it's really important for people to have access to this really comprehensive panel, just because you never know, you really never know. And people swear they're like, no, I'm fully like Sephardi. And then it comes out, then they carry something Ashkenazi and they're shocked. So you really never know. And that's why this type of testing is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Well, thanks for answering the question today. And we will see you on our next segment of Ask a Genetic Counselor.
Sounds great. Thanks.